North Korea maintains 1.32 million active troops, 4,300 tanks, 21,000 artillery pieces, and the fourth largest military in the world. Pyongyang says one word and 200,000 special forces infiltrate south while artillery turns the capital into rubble. That's the propaganda version. The reality is more complicated and far more disturbing. Could North Korea stop a US invasion? The short answer is no. Not in any conventional military sense, where stopping means defeating American forces and pushing them back across the Pacific. North Korea can't win that fight. What it can do is make victory so expensive in blood, time, and treasure that Washington questions whether it's worth it, and that's exactly the strategy Pyongyang has built. Not to win, but to ensure losing costs more than anyone's willing to pay. Here's why this nightmare scenario has kept military planners awake since 1953. The Korean People's Army fields approximately 1.28 million active duty personnel, making it one of the 5 largest standing armies on the planet despite North Korea's population of only 26 million. That's roughly 50 active military members per 1,000 citizens, the highest ratio globally. Add another 560 to 600,000 reserves, and 5.7 million paramilitary forces in the worker peasant Red Guards. And you're looking at a nation where nearly 30% of the population has military training and can be mobilized during wartime. That's the force structure. Now here's the catch. North Korea hasn't fought a large-scale conventional war since 1953. Nobody knows how these units would actually perform under fire against a modern military. Training is limited by chronic fuel shortages. Ammunition reserves get conserved because producing more is expensive and difficult under sanctions. The 2010 Yeonpyeong Island shelling, where North Korean artillery struck South Korean territory, provided a rare glimpse: high dud rates, poor accuracy, ammunition that didn't detonate because storage conditions had degraded the explosives. That's the reality behind the million-man army. Huge on paper, untested in practice, constrained by logistics that are held together with rust and propaganda. But size still matters. Even a poorly trained, poorly equipped force of 1.3 million creates problems. You can't ignore them. You can't bypass them. You have to kill them, which takes time, ammunition, and lives. And that's before accounting for the fact that North Korea has had 70 years to fortify every inch of defensible terrain with bunkers, tunnels, and hardened artillery sites designed to survive American airstrikes. Moving on to ground forces. The Korean People's Army ground force fields between 4,200 and 4,300 tanks. Most are Soviet-era types or Chinese copies. T-54 Sulphur 5s from the 1950s, T-62s from the 1960s, domestically produced Chanma-ho variants, and Pokpung-ho tanks that incorporate upgrades but are still fundamentally based on 50-year-old designs. The newest addition is the M225, and features modern armor layouts and anti-tank missile launchers. But production numbers remain unknown. These tanks are obsolete by Western standards. An M1A2 Abrams would shred them in open terrain. But tanks aren't meant for tank-on-tank duels in North Korea's operational doctrine. They're meant to support infantry assaults, break through defensive lines, and exploit breakthroughs once artillery has softened targets. In that role, even old tanks work, especially when they're operating in mountainous, forested terrain where standoff engagements are difficult and ambushes favor the defender. The ground force also operates 2,200 to 2,500 armored personnel carriers, 8,600 artillery pieces, and 4,800 to 5,500 multiple rocket launchers. The artillery is the real threat. North Korea has 21,000 total artillery pieces deployed across the country. About 324 systems are long-range, 170 Koksan self-propelled guns, and 240 multiple rocket launchers, capable of reaching Seoul from positions north of the DMZ. These are the systems everyone talks about when discussing the Sea of Fire threat to the South Korean capital. Here's the actual math. Seoul has an area of 605 square kilometers. The 324 long-range systems positioned within range could, in theory, saturate parts of the city with high explosive rounds. A 2020 RAND Corporation study estimated that North Korean artillery attacks on Seoul could produce between 4,500 and 200,000 casualties, depending on the scenario, whether North Korea fires for 5 minutes or an hour, whether civilians are indoors or outdoors, whether the attack targets military installations or population centers. More recent analysis suggests the threat has been overstated. Most buildings in Seoul are reinforced concrete. South Korea has 1.2 million shelter spaces and civil defense procedures refined over decades. Counter-battery radar and precision strike capabilities have improved dramatically. A 2,257 casualties, between 697 and 4,555, depending on the scenario, far below the apocalyptic figures thrown around in media coverage. The Yeonpyeong Island incident showed that North Korean shells struggled to penetrate concrete structures, and dud rates were high enough to cast doubt on overall ammunition reliability. But here's the problem. Even the lower casualty estimates are politically unacceptable. Thousands of civilians killed in the opening hours of war changes the calculus. It doesn't matter if North Korea's artillery can't actually turn Seoul into a sea of fire. What matters is that it can kill enough people fast enough that South Korea and the United States face immediate public pressure to stop the conflict. And stopping a war after it started, on terms favorable to Pyongyang, has been the goal all along. The newest addition to North Korea's artillery arsenal is the 600 mmKN-25 multiple rocket launcher. This system, which Kim Jong-un has called Core Central Striking Means, blurs the line between rocket artillery and short-range ballistic missile. The KN-25 uses in-flight control and guided fins to achieve accuracy at ranges up to 380 kilometers, meaning it can hit targets deep inside South Korea. Reports suggest it's designed to carry tactical nuclear warheads, which would make it a strategic weapon rather than a conventional battlefield system. Artillery defense is extraordinarily difficult. You can't intercept 170 shells with missile defense systems. Counter-battery fire works, but only if you detect the launch, calculate the position, and strike before the guns displace. North Korean doctrine emphasizes shoot and scoot, fire, relocate, fire again. Many artillery positions are in hardened artillery sites built into mountains, designed to survive airstrikes. Destroying them requires direct hits with bunker-busting munitions, which takes time and exposes aircraft to North Korean air defenses. The US and South Korea would eventually suppress North Korean artillery, but eventually means hours or days during which shells are landing in Seoul. That's the window North Korea needs to inflict casualties, create panic, and demonstrate that further escalation carries unacceptable costs. Moving on to special operations. The Korean People's Army Special Operations Force fields an estimated 200,000 troops, making it one of the largest special forces organizations in the world. This isn't a precision commando force in the Western sense. These are infiltration units, trained to cross the DMZ, strike rear area targets, sabotage infrastructure, and spread chaos behind enemy lines. North Korea has a long history of infiltration operations. In 1968, 31 commandos nearly assassinated South Korea's president in a raid on the Blue House. In 1996, a submarine ran aground near Gangneung, and the crew attempted to escape on foot, leading to a 49-day manhunt. In 2010, North Korean infiltrators are suspected of sinking the South Korean corvette Cheonan with a torpedo, killing 46 sailors. These operations demonstrate capability, training, and willingness to accept casualties in pursuit of strategic objectives. In a wartime scenario, North Korean special forces would infiltrate via tunnels. At least 4 have been discovered under the DMZ, with speculation that more exist. Midget submarines, air-cushioned landing craft, and transport aircraft. Their targets would include airfields, command centers, ammunition depots, communications nodes, and critical infrastructure like power plants and bridges. The goal isn't to hold territory. It's to disrupt command and control, delay reinforcements, and force the US and South Korea to divert resources to rear area security instead of frontline operations. North Korea operates a fleet of approximately 302 biplanes, ancient transport aircraft from the 1940s, that are slow, low-flying, and constructed mostly of fabric and wood. These planes are nearly invisible to modern radar because they lack the metal cross-section that radar systems are designed to detect. US and South Korean forces discovered this the hard way in 2022, when 5 North Korean UAVs crossed into South Korean airspace and evaded interception despite advanced air defense systems. If fabric-covered drones can penetrate undetected, fabric-covered biplanes carrying Special Forces teams present a similar threat. Would 200,000 Special Forces troops fundamentally alter the outcome of a US invasion? No, but they create friction, slow the advance, inflict casualties on support units, and force commanders to worry about threats in areas that should already be secure. That's asymmetric warfare. You can't win, so you make the enemy bleed for every mile. Moving on to air power, the Korean People's Army Air Force operates approximately 468 combat aircraft, with total inventory including transport and training aircraft reaching 1,131. This is a museum of Cold War aviation. The most modern fighters are 35 to 60 miles G-29 Fulcrums, which entered service in the Soviet Union in 1982 and are now 4 decades old. The Mi-G-29 is a capable 4th-generation fighter when properly maintained and flown by trained pilots. But North Korea's MiG-29s are original variants without modern upgrades, and pilot flight hours are severely restricted by fuel shortages. The rest of the fleet is worse. North Korea operates 56 miles G-23 Floggers, a swing-wing fighter from the 1970s. There are 26 to 120 miles G-21 Fishbeds depending on source estimates, a fighter that first flew in 1959. Chinese-built variants like the Shenyang J-6, a copy of the Mi-G-19, and Chengdu J-7, a copy of the Mi-G-21, make up another several hundred aircraft. These are subsonic or barely supersonic fighters with no modern avionics, no beyond visual range missiles, and no ability to survive in a contested airspace against American F-22s, F-35s and F-15s. There are reports that Russia may transfer additional MiG-29s and Su-27 flankers to North Korea in exchange for support in Ukraine, which would represent a modest modernization if it happens. But even modernized fourth-generation fighters struggle against fifth-generation stealth aircraft, and pilot training remains the limiting factor. North Korean pilots fly perhaps 15 to 25 hours per year due to fuel constraints. American fighter pilots log 200-plus hours annually. You can have the best aircraft in the world, but if your pilots can't exploit its capabilities, you lose. The Air Force also operates about 80 Il-28 Beagle medium bombers, subsonic aircraft from the 1950s with a bomb load of 1,000 kilograms and a combat radius of 550 nautical miles. These are cannon fodder in modern air defense environments. North Korea has 34 Su-25 Frogfoot close air support jets, which are more survivable and designed to operate in contested environments. But 34 aircraft don't change the strategic picture. Would the North Korean Air Force contest U.S. air superiority? No, but it doesn't need to. North Korea's air defense strategy relies on ground-based surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft artillery, not fighter interception. The Air Force's mission is defensive, protect key installations, conduct limited strikes if opportunities present, and preserve assets in underground shelters for as long as possible. Every sortie that forces American aircraft to maneuver, every SAM site that has to be suppressed, every air defense network that ties down strike packages, these all consume time and resources. The bigger air threat comes from drones. In 2002, 5 North Korean UAVs penetrated South Korean airspace and evaded interception for hours. These were small, cheap, and nearly impossible to track with systems designed for fast-moving aircraft. If North Korea mass-produces cheap drones and uses them to strike power grids, airfields, or command centers, air defense systems optimized for ballistic missiles and fighters struggle to respond. That's the nightmare scenario. Not MiG-29s dogfighting with F-22s, but swarms of $5,000 drones overwhelming million-dollar air defense missiles. Moving on to naval forces, the Korean People's Navy operates approximately 630 combat vessels and 70 submarines, making it one of the largest navies by hull count. But this is a coastal defense force, not a blue water fleet capable of projecting power beyond North Korean waters. The 2 largest surface combatants are Cho Hyun-class destroyers, commissioned in 22,250, displacing 5,000+ tons, and reportedly equipped with vertical launch systems and ballistic missile capability. One of these ships capsized during launch and had to be refloated, which tells you something about North Korea's shipbuilding quality control. The rest of the surface fleet consists of frigates, corvettes, patrol boats, and fast attack craft, small, lightly armed vessels designed for coastal defense and harassment operations. Most date from the Cold War, they'd be destroyed quickly in any engagement with U.S. or South Korean naval forces, but their mission isn't surface combat. It's mine-laying infiltration support and creating local area denial in shallow, confined waters where larger ships can't operate effectively. The submarine force is more dangerous. North Korea operates approximately 20 Romeo-class diesel-electric submarines, obsolete Soviet designs from the 1950s. There are 40-plus Song-O and Song-O-2 coastal submarines, small boats designed for special forces insertion and reconnaissance. The Song-O class was involved in the Cheonan sinking in 2010, which demonstrated that even primitive submarines can achieve tactical surprise. North Korea has 1 operational ballistic missile submarine, the Hero Kim Kunok, a heavily modified Romeo-class boat, fitted to carry submarine-launched ballistic missiles. The operational status is questionable. Submarines are complex and difficult to maintain, and North Korea's industrial base struggles with advanced systems. But the strategic intent is clear: a submarine-based nuclear deterrent that can't be destroyed in a first strike. In January 2006, North Korea revealed construction of an 870-ton nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine, which would represent a massive technological leap. State media showed the hull nearly complete, and analysts estimate it could be ready for sea trials within months. If operational, this submarine would give North Korea a true second strike capability, allowing missiles to be launched from underwater platforms that are far harder to track and target than land-based launchers. There's skepticism about whether North Korea actually built a nuclear reactor, with speculation that Russia may have provided technology or even a reactor from a retired submarine in exchange for North Korean support in Ukraine. But even if the submarine works as advertised, 1 boat does not a credible sea-based deterrent make. The U.S. operates 14 Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines. China has 6 Jin-class SSBNs. A single North Korean SSBN would need to remain at sea continuously to provide deterrence, which requires 2 or 3 boats in rotation, 1 on patrol, 1 in port, 1 in maintenance. North Korea doesn't have that infrastructure. But again, the goal isn't parity. The goal is complication. A submarine at sea, even one that's noisy and tracked by American attack submarines, forces commanders to account for it. Can you guarantee it won't launch? If there's a 20% chance it survives and fires, does that change your calculus? That's what North Korea is buying. Not guaranteed survival, but uncertainty. Moving on to missiles and nuclear weapons. North Korea operates the largest ballistic missile arsenal in its region, with more than 1,000 missiles according to South Korean estimates, though U.S. Department of Defense assessments suggest fewer than 200 launchers. The truth is probably somewhere between those figures, complicated by the fact that some systems are mobile and can be moved, hidden, and redeployed rapidly. The missile inventory includes short-range systems like the KN-23 and KN-24, which resemble Russian Iskander and U.S. Ataxmis designs, and feature maneuvering reentry vehicles that complicate interception. Medium-range missiles include the Hwasong-7 and No-Dong, capable of reaching Japan. Intermediate-range systems like the Hwasong-12 can strike Guam. Intercontinental ballistic missiles like the Hwasong-14, Hwasong-15, and Hwasong-17 are designed to reach the U.S. mainland, though their operational reliability is unknown. North Korea has conducted numerous missile tests, demonstrating steady progress in range, accuracy, and payload capacity. The Hwasong-17, tested in 2202, is a massive ICBM comparable in size to Soviet-era systems, with estimated range exceeding 15,000 kilometers. Whether it works reliably, whether it can survive reentry, whether the warhead separates correctly, these are open questions, but the trend line is clear. North Korea is improving, and every test provides data that refines the next generation. Then there's the nuclear program. North Korea has conducted 6 nuclear tests between 2006 and 2017, with yields progressing from less than a kiloton to an estimated 250 kilotons for the 2017 test. U.S. intelligence estimates North Korea possesses material for 100-plus nuclear warheads, though the exact number of assembled weapons is unknown. The regime has claimed successful miniaturization of warheads to fit on ballistic missiles, and there's no reason to assume they're lying. Miniaturization is difficult, but North Korea has had years to work the problem. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. A U.S. invasion of North Korea almost certainly triggers nuclear use. Kim Jong-un has stated explicitly that North Korea will use nuclear weapons if the regime faces existential threat. An invasion is, by definition, an existential threat. The doctrine isn't no first use. It's use them or lose them. Would North Korea launch ICBMs at American cities? Maybe. Probably not initially. Escalating to strikes on the U.S. homeland invites total annihilation. More likely, tactical nuclear weapons get used against concentrations of U.S. and South Korean forces on the Korean Peninsula, troop staging areas, air bases, carrier strike groups if they're within range. One 20-kiloton warhead on a beach landing wipes out an entire Marine regiment. A 50-kiloton warhead on Osan Air Base eliminates a major logistical hub and contaminates runways for weeks. The U.S. has overwhelming nuclear superiority and could turn North Korea into radioactive glass in response. But that's deterrence theory, not operational reality. Would Washington trade Seattle for Pyongyang? That's the bet Kim is making, that the threat of even one American city getting hit is enough to stop an invasion before it starts. Moving on to logistics and sustainability. North Korea maintains strategic reserves designed to sustain full-scale war for approximately 100 days. This includes 1.5 million tons of fuel and 1.7 million tons of ammunition stockpiled across the country, in hardened sites. Food reserves are sufficient to feed the military for 500 days, though that assumes civilians go hungry, which is historically accurate for North Korea during crises. 100 days is optimistic. The 2010 Yeonpyeong shelling demonstrated ammunition reliability issues caused by poor storage conditions and lack of humidity control. Fuel stockpiles degrade over time without proper maintenance. Spare parts for Soviet-era equipment are difficult to source under sanctions. North Korea's industrial base can produce small arms ammunition and artillery shells domestically. But complex systems like aircraft engines, tank transmissions, and missile guidance components require imports or sophisticated manufacturing capabilities that don't exist in sufficient scale. Chronic fuel shortages limit training. Artillery units fire limited rounds to conserve stocks. Pilots fly 1.525 hours per year instead of 200. Tank crews practice maneuvers without burning fuel. This creates a readiness spiral. Units can't train effectively, so combat performance suffers. So equipment is preserved for real war that hasn't happened in 70 years. When war finally comes, ammunition doesn't work, tanks break down, and pilots can't execute complex operations because they've never practiced. But here's the thing about desperation. It makes you dangerous in different ways. North Korea doesn't need to sustain operations for a year. It needs to survive the initial American onslaught, inflict enough casualties to make continuing the war politically difficult, and hold out long enough for China to intervene diplomatically or militarily. 100 days might be enough for that. Moving on to the invasion problem. Could the United States invade and conquer North Korea? Yes, absolutely. The U.S. military has overwhelming advantages in air power, precision strike, electronic warfare, logistics, training, and technology. North Korean forces would be destroyed in weeks. Pyongyang would fall, and Kim Jong-un would be dead or in exile. But victory isn't the problem. The problem is getting to victory without losing more than you're willing to pay. An invasion of North Korea requires massive ground forces. The terrain is mountainous and heavily forested, limiting maneuver warfare and favoring defenders. Every ridge, valley, and tunnel has been fortified over 70 years. North Korea has artillery positioned to strike invasion routes, mines seeded across likely approaches, and 1.3 million troops who've been told their entire lives that Americans are coming to kill them. You'd need 500,000 troops minimum, probably more. That requires months of deployment, which North Korea would detect, giving them time to disperse forces, move mobile missiles, and prepare defenses. The element of surprise is gone. Air superiority would be achieved quickly, but air power alone doesn't win wars. You need boots on the ground to hold territory. Every city, every bunker complex, every fortified position needs to be cleared. That's infantry work, and infantry takes casualties. Artillery is the immediate threat. North Korea fires everything in the opening hours. Seoul takes casualties, South Korea's economy craters, global markets panic. The US suppresses most artillery within 48 hours, but the damage is done. Politically, economically, psychologically. Special forces infiltrate south, striking air bases, supply depots, and command centers. Some get killed quickly, but others operate for days or weeks, forcing rear area security to divert resources. Convoys get ambushed. Bridges get blown. Commanders hesitate because they don't know where threats are. Then there's chemical weapons. North Korea possesses an estimated 2,500 to 5,000 tons of chemical agents, including nerve agents like VX and sarin. These could be delivered via artillery, missiles, or even drones. Chemical weapons don't have to kill everyone. They just have to force troops into protective gear, slow operations, create casualties that overwhelm medical infrastructure, and terrify civilian populations. And finally, nuclear weapons. North Korea uses them. Maybe against carrier strike groups. Maybe against air bases in Japan. Maybe against troop concentrations pushing north from Seoul. The US retaliates, but now you're in a nuclear exchange on the Korean peninsula. Radiation is spreading, millions are at risk, and China is mobilizing forces on the border because it cannot allow a unified, US-aligned Korea on its doorstep. That's the scenario North Korea has built, a strategy of mutually assured pain, where victory is possible for America but costs tens of thousands of lives, trillions in economic damage, potential nuclear exchange. It's not about winning. It's about making sure nobody wants to fight in the first place. Could North Korea stop a US invasion? No. But it could make it so expensive that Washington chooses not to invade at all. And that's been the strategy since 1953. Survive by making aggression costlier than anyone's willing to pay. This is every major weapon system North Korea operates, and why war on the peninsula remains the worst option on the table.